My landlord's daughter whispered, "It's my first time tonight, is there room in your bed?" And she was standing barefoot in my doorway at midnight, soaked from a Vermont storm, holding one wool sock and an open umbrella indoors with a tree branch through her bedroom window and her father's dark house 10 feet behind her. I had known her for exactly 4 days. Long enough to learn her name was Marlo Sutton. Long enough to know she drew small birds in the margins of her grocery lists. That she introduced her half-dead ficus to strangers like he was a war veteran. That 3 weeks earlier she had walked out of an engagement to a man who used the word cute like a leash. My name is Wesley Hart. I was 34, the carpenter in the unit below hers. The man her father Hank, retired deputy, widowed, the kind of landlord who said don't make it weird like he meant it, had warned exactly once. And when she looked up at me with rain in her eyelashes and asked that question, I already knew my answer was going to undo every quiet thing I had built since the woman I almost married told me I wasn't exciting enough to keep. But here is what I still cannot explain. Why a woman who had just escaped one man knocked on the door of another 4 days after meeting him? And who the stranger was in the charcoal coat who pulled into our drive 48 hours later, holding white flowers, smiling like he already owned the answer? Because my landlord's daughter did not ask if there was room in my bed because she wanted a man. She asked because, for the first time in her life, she was choosing the room. She had arrived on a Wednesday in a small blue car packed so badly the back window was just a wall of pillow. Cream sweater 2 sizes too big, tired eyes. "You're the woodworker," she said. "You're the daughter. Marlo. Wesley." That was the whole opening. I helped her carry 6 boxes up the outside stairs, a dying ficus she called Gerald, a cedar-smelling armchair, a small leather notebook she held like it had her name written on the inside cover. She told me about Bennett on the third box. She didn't cry, she said it like a weather report. "We were engaged, we're not anymore, that's the entire story for now." I didn't ask. She said, "You're not going to ask." I said, "You told me that was the entire story." She looked at me like I had just handed her something she hadn't expected to hold. For 3 days, that was the rhythm. I sanded railings, she unpacked. Hank watched us both from his porch with the patience of a man who had once arrested people for less. Then on the fourth night, Vermont gave us a storm. It started building at noon. By dinner the lake had gone glass still. By 11 the power blinked twice and surrendered. I was in bed reading by lantern light when I heard it. Not thunder. Wood. A long, splitting crack above my head, a short one, a soft, heavy impact. Then the muffled, startled sound of a woman who has just forgotten which words she knows. I was up the outside stairs before I made the choice to be. She opened the door before I knocked. The wind hit me in the face. Her single east window had a tree branch through it, not a huge one, fist-thick, resting on her bed like an uninvited guest. Rain was already darkening her sheets. Marlo stood in the middle of her studio in flannel pants and a t-shirt, holding one wool sock in her hand and an open umbrella over her head indoors, which is how I knew she was in shock and not actually trying to be funny. "Hi," she said. "There's a tree in my bed." "I can see that." I was going to put my sock on, and then there was a tree in my bed. I laughed before I could stop myself. She laughed too, the kind of laugh that's 80% adrenaline. Then her face cracked, her eyes filled, the umbrella tipped sideways in her hand. I closed it, I set it on the floor. I didn't touch her because she hadn't asked me to. "Pack a bag," I said, "you can take my couch." She nodded. She didn't move. "Marlo. I know, I'm going, she pressed the heel of her hand against one eye. This was supposed to be my first night. "Your first night what?" Rain was coming through the broken window in sheets now. We were both getting wet. I should have moved her. I didn't, because she was about to say something true. "My first night sleeping somewhere I picked," she said. "Not my dad's house, not Bennett's apartment, not my college dorm, mine. I picked this room, I picked the lamp, I picked the sheets. I was going to sleep in a bed I chose, and a tree fell on it." She laughed once wet, tired. Cosmic note received. Downstairs in my apartment, I lit 3 candles and made up the couch with the good blanket my sister had sent from Charlotte that I had never used, because using it felt like admitting I lived here. When she came out of the bathroom, she was wearing my t-shirt. It hit her at the knees. Her hair was dark and combed back. She held the wool sock in her hand again like she had decided it was a personal item now. The wind shoved the barn. Somewhere on the property, a second tree gave up and went down with a long groan.
She flinched. Wesley. Yes.
She looked at the couch, she looked at the bedroom door behind me, she looked at her own hands. "It's my first time tonight," she said quietly. "Sleeping somewhere I picked and the picking didn't go great. I don't want to be alone. I'm not asking for anything else." With the door open, with my dad 10 feet away through a wall, her voice steadied. "Is there room in your bed?" A smarter man would have said no. I said yes with one condition. Her eyebrows lifted, wary. "You don't apologize for asking, not tonight, not in the morning, not next week." She stared at me, then her whole face changed, the way a window changes when someone inside finally opens the curtain. "Okay," she whispered. I reached for the candle on the dresser to lead her in. And through the rain-streaked window, across the gravel on her father's dark porch. A single light clicked on. Hank was awake. Hank was watching. Morning came through my one east window in a slow, careful way, like it was trying not to wake her. Marlo was still asleep. A full foot of mattress between us, exactly the way we had left it. The wool sock sat on the nightstand like a small flag of peace. Her hand was open on the pillow, palm up, the way a person sleeps when they have not had to brace against anything in a long time. I lay very still and watched the ceiling, because watching her felt like something a man should earn. Outside, the storm had washed everything quiet. The lake was the color of a pewter cup. 2 trees were down in Hank's yard. Leaves were stuck to my windshield like wet stamps. When Marlo woke, she did it in stages. Fingers first, then her eyes opened, slow and confused, and landed on me. For 1 second I watched her. Remember, she didn't apologize, she held the line. "Morning," she whispered. "Morning." Then she smiled, small, crooked, the scar at the corner of her mouth pulling left. I didn't drool, I checked. "My gentleman, I wouldn't have told you." She laughed into the pillow. I made her coffee on the propane burner because the power was still out. She sat cross-legged on the counter in my t-shirt and rolled-up sweatpants, watching me measure grounds like it was a science demonstration. "You sort your screws." "Not going to apologize for that." Gravel crunched outside. I went still. Marlo's eyes met mine over the mug. Hank's truck. He didn't knock. He didn't have to. He set a paper cup of coffee on my porch railing, glanced once at the broken window above us, glanced once at the curtains of my apartment, and walked back to his truck without a single word. Marlo exhaled. "Was that a good silence or a bad silence?" she whispered. "With Hank, those are the same silence." She laughed, but her hand had drifted to her sternum, the way people touch a thing they're trying to keep inside. I spent the morning on her window. Plywood first, then a frame. Marlo held nails for me in her open palm and handed them up one at a time like an assistant in a small surgery. Sawdust clung to her sweater. Sunlight came through the gap and made a line across her cheek. At one point she said, "My mom used to sit on the porch and watch my dad fix things. She said it was the most romantic thing in the world, just watching a man pay attention." I lowered the hammer. "She died when I was 19, Marlo said. "And my dad has not said her name out loud since." She looked at me steady. "He brought you 2 coffees this morning, Wesley, too." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing, which in Hank's family I was beginning to understand was a full sentence. That night the power came back at dusk. The fridge hummed. The kitchen light buzzed on. The world rearranged itself into ordinary. I made up the couch again. I made it carefully. She walked past it. She walked into my bedroom in her own t-shirt this time, sat on the edge of the bed, looked at me in the doorway and said, "I'm not in shock tonight, I'm just choosing." I did not say with one condition. I said, "Okay." A foot of mattress between us again. But this time her hand crossed it in the dark and rested on top of mine, light as a leaf. She fell asleep first. The next morning I started a rocking chair in the shop for a tourist in Burlington. Marlo brought me a sandwich at noon and stayed 2 hours, sitting on the workbench with her notebook open, drawing small birds in the margins of a list I couldn't read. By afternoon we had stopped pretending we weren't a we. By 4 I was teaching her how to use a spoke shave. By 4:30 she had shaved one perfect curl of cherry wood off a chair leg and gasped like she had performed surgery. By 5 gravel crunched in the driveway again, but this time it wasn't Hank's truck, it was a black sedan. Clean, recent, the kind of car a man buys to be seen in. The driver's door opened, a charcoal wool coat, polished shoes, white tulips wrapped in butcher paper, a smile that arrived before the man did. Marlo's hand went still on the spoke shave, the wood curl fell. "Marlo," the man said warmly like he was tasting her name. "Sweetheart, there you are." He looked at me, the smile did not change. "You must be the carpenter," he said. And on the porch of the main house, slowly, deliberately, the screen door opened, and Hank Sutton stepped out into the late afternoon light and rested one hand on the railing exactly where 20 years ago his wife used to sit and watch him work. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Bennett stepped onto the gravel. The tulips were perfect. Crisp paper, white petals, not a single bruised stem, the kind of bouquet a man buys when he is used to arriving with the right thing. "Marlo," he said again, gentler this time, you didn't answer your phone. She set the spokeshave down. I watched her do something I had never seen her do. She squared her shoulders without rising on her toes. The shrinking she had described in the dark 4 nights ago had a posture, so did the unshrinking. I blocked your number, Bennett. His smile flickered just once. Sweetheart, your father's been worried. From the porch, Hank said absolutely nothing. Bennett's eyes moved to me. The polite warmth was still there, but I could see what was underneath it now, the way a man looks at a chair he is about to move. Could I have a moment with my fiancé? I'm not your fiancé. Marlo. I'm not your fiancé. She said it the second time the way you say a thing you have rehearsed in the dark. Bennett breathed out through his nose. You're being dramatic, he said. You're embarrassing yourself in front of a stranger. He's not a stranger. He's a carpenter. There it was, the word cute in a different costume. I wanted to step in front of her so badly my hand twitched. I didn't. I stayed exactly where I was beside her, half a step back, close enough to be felt, far enough to be nothing she had to lean on. She felt me there anyway. Bennett, she said, you used to tell me my ideas were cute, my friends were tired, my mother would have wanted me to compromise, and every time you said it I shrank. I shrank so small I started apologizing for the weather. She took one step forward. I came home to find out how big I actually was. The bouquet lowered. And then from the porch, quiet, dry, the way he said morning. Eleanor never liked you. We all turned. Hank was still resting his hand on the railing. My wife, Marlo's mother, Eleanor, his voice did not shake. She told me the week after you two got engaged, she said he talks to her the way a man talks to a dog he is training, and I told her she was being unfair, and she said, Hank, I won't be here much longer, promise me you'll watch. He looked at his daughter. His eyes were wet. I've been watching, baby. Marlo's hand flew to her mouth. 8 years of silence, one sentence. Bennett opened his mouth, closed it, set the tulips on the gravel like a man leaving evidence. He got back into his clean black sedan and drove away. Marlo did not watch him go. She walked to her father. He met her at the bottom of the porch steps and put both arms around her like a man who had been saving the gesture for the right weather. She cried into his shoulder the way grown women cry when something old finally lets them. I stood by the workbench with a cherry curl at my feet and did not move because I was not part of that hug, and I knew it, and I was grateful to know it. Hank looked at me once over Marlo's head. He nodded. That was the entire conversation. We buried the tulips in the compost the next morning. Marlo insisted anything that arrived as a leash didn't get to be a centerpiece. Gerald the ficus did not survive the second week. We held a small funeral over the trash can. I cried laughing. We replaced him with a fern named Walter. The seasons did what seasons do. Vermont went red, then bare, then white. By December she had a key to my place. By February 2 sweaters on my chair. By April her notebook on my kitchen table, the birds in the margins with names. Hank started saying good morning, the whole phrase out loud. One evening in May, exactly 1 year after the storm, I was sanding a rocking chair on the porch when I heard her on the outside stairs. I looked up. Marlo was coming down with a single cardboard box in her arms. The box was labeled, in her handwriting, kitchen/maybe taxes. She stopped 3 feet from me. My lease upstairs is up. I know. And I am perfectly capable of renewing it. You aren't. But I don't want to. She took one more step. Wesley Hart, she whispered, it's my first time tonight doing this on purpose. Nobody chasing me, nobody breaking my window, nobody to apologize to, just me choosing. Her eyes shone. Is there room in your bed? I set the sandpaper down. Yes, with one condition. She smiled before I said it. You never apologize for asking. She crossed the last 3 feet. And on the porch of the main house, in the soft blue of a Vermont evening, the screen door opened and Hank Sutton stepped out with 2 coffees in his hand. He set one on the railing where his wife used to sit. He lifted the other to us in something that was not a toast, but was not far from one either. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. So tell me, if your landlord's daughter had knocked on your door in a storm and asked if there was room in your bed, knowing she wasn't asking for a man but for a room of her own, would you have said yes? Would you have stayed beside her instead of stepping in front of her? Have you ever met someone at the strangest possible moment and felt your whole life quietly rearrange? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one moved you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.